You're ugly, incompetent, and a spendthrift. Get married quickly because you're a nuisance.
That's what my father said to me when I turned 16, spewing insults. Unable to rebel, I married a man I didn't even know. A lifeless, emotionless married life ensued. Despair engulfed me. But life is unpredictable. Little did I know, a major turnaround was waiting ahead. My name is Nancy, 35 years old. I bought Valentine's chocolates for myself, and when my husband asked,
"What about mine?"
I apologized. I intended to buy his until I got to the store, but I got so caught up in buying for myself that I forgot. I'll send my husband some nice wine next time. Yeah, let's do that. Nowadays, I live peacefully in a loving home, but I used to hate being at home when I was young. Until my sister Amy was old enough, it wasn't like that. Amy, 2 years younger than me, already had distinct facial features from infancy, and everyone expected her to become beautiful in the future. A few years later, surpassing everyone's expectations, my sister grew up to be adorable and became a kids model at my mother's urging. It wasn't major acting gigs, just appearing briefly in local construction-related commercials or showing her profile on flyers for community events. She wasn't the real deal as everyone imagined for a child actor. Yet, for my parents, even my sister's small achievements were a significant honor. They adored her like a cherished accessory, while, predictably, their interest in me dwindled rapidly. It's because I inherited from my father's side grandmother, a sturdy type. Unlike my sister, who was born with slender features typical of modern children, I was the complete opposite. Not only did I inherit a robust frame, but I also had a plump figure, unlike the rest of my slim family members. Despite eating the same meals and hardly ever snacking to avoid standing out from the family, I couldn't understand why I was the only chubby one. How many times did I envy my sister's slim physique? However, even as a child, I understood that comparing myself to others was futile. I am who I am. I tried to focus on my strengths. Yet, my parents denied my existence.
Well, you were the first child, like a prototype. The craftsmanship was terrible.
At some point, my drunken parents, while having drinks in the living room, spoke ill of me. I overheard these words, and needless to say, they cast a shadow of doubt on whether I was just a failed prototype for a long time. My beautiful mother was a confident woman when it came to her appearance, always meticulous no matter her age. While it's fine to take pride in oneself, she was also harsh on others. She would disdainfully recount incidents like when a neighbor, a mother of quintuplets, came out early in the morning in plain clothes to take out the trash. Apparently, her husband, a high earner, was hardly ever home, leaving her to manage everything alone. Instead, a woman who seemed to be her mother-in-law would often visit, sometimes with raised voices heard from their house. Looking back, she must have been going through a tough time herself. Even from a child's perspective, she always seemed to be struggling. Amidst single-handedly raising children and facing numerous challenges, what's wrong with being in plain clothes? If anything, she deserved praise for managing household chores admirably amidst all that. I used to think my mother couldn't empathize with others' backgrounds, being cold-hearted. It was sad that she couldn't find me, with my imperfect appearance, adorable, but it was just the natural course of things. As I entered elementary school and reached the age where I should have been receiving pocket money, my sister got $10 while I got nothing. The visible disparities between us became more pronounced. For instance, When we had meals, my sister would get plenty of meat in her dish while mine would be loaded with vegetables she disliked. Coincidentally, the ones I disliked too. Despite my mother's actions, my father remained silent, and even though my sister probably had a faint sense that something was amiss in our household, she seemed to revel in my precarious position. There was no ally for me within the family. Moreover, while my sister went unpunished for breaking things, I would be severely scolded. My mother often used the phrase,
"You're the older sister, aren't you?"
as if it was a strong card, frequently casting me as the villain. It was common for younger siblings to receive hand-me-down clothes, but in our case, if my sister didn't want them or if they didn't fit her anymore, they became mine. Consequently, I always wore tight-fitting clothes, with sleeves and hems consistently too short. Wearing tight clothes when I was already thick-set and chubby was the worst. It made me look even chunkier, and naturally, I became the butt of jokes among my classmates. Even though it was my mother who made me wear ill-fitting clothes, she too would smirk at me with contempt. Whether at home or outside, I was constantly told,
"Your sister is so cute, isn't she?"
Hearing this repeatedly, my once bright personality gradually darkened. Even when interacting with friends, I would entertain paranoid thoughts like, maybe this person also finds me ugly. Or, perhaps deep down, they want to be friends with my sister instead. Looking back now, I realize how absurd it was to entertain such delusions, but at the time, I was trapped in a cycle of self-victimization. With a thoroughly negative mindset, my relationships with others inevitably suffered, and my circle of friends dwindled gradually. Yet, rather than feeling down about it, I preferred to isolate myself willingly. I was tired of engaging with others while constantly doubting their feelings, finding solace in solitude instead. As I endured those dark times in elementary and middle school, a certain incident occurred just before I was about to enter high school. It turned out that my parents hadn't paid my high school enrollment fee. Originally, they had no intention of sending me to high school. They'd rather spend money on my sister's dance and acting lessons if it came to using funds for my high school education. I somehow managed to persuade them, finally getting them to promise that if I passed the entrance exam for a public high school, they would let me attend. At the time, with my sister's increasing involvement in entertainment activities, and being burdened with household chores by my parents, I studied desperately amidst the chaos and managed to pass the exam as they instructed, securing a spot at a public high school. I thought everything would be fine now, and although I was just a child, I foolishly trusted my parents and felt relieved. But I was wrong. Those people weren't my parents. They were just monsters who brought me into this world. My mother casually remarked,
"Enrollment fee? Oh, I forgot about that. But it doesn't matter. You don't need to go to high school anyway. With or without education, with that face of yours, your life won't amount to anything worthwhile."
Without any apology, my father and sister laughed uproariously as my mother spewed her insults. It was too late for me to realize that the enrollment fee hadn't been paid, and I had to give up on entering high school. Sure, I could have worked part-time to save up money and enrolled a year later, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like I had a sort of burnout syndrome. The path I had desperately grasped by obediently following my parents' orders was suddenly blocked, and I found myself feeling indifferent, like I didn't care anymore. I couldn't help but have dark thoughts that even with a normal education, I wouldn't be loved by anyone. It's separate from all this, though. I wonder why adolescence tends to turn so negative. My father sarcastically remarked,
"Wasn't it better not to go to school? Now you can do plenty of household chores."
Despite his snide comment, I had become so despondent that I didn't mind living such a life. I couldn't muster up the motivation to go to work, nor did I have the energy to leave home. Looking back, I realized I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. I was living each day like a robot, just fulfilling the tasks my parents demanded of me. One day, my father suddenly said to me,
"You're turning 16 tomorrow, right?"
Despite recently ignoring me, his mention of my birthday brought a smile to my face. I couldn't help but wonder if he would celebrate it this year, perhaps because I've been helping with chores. However, his next words shattered that hope as he casually demanded,
"Hurry up and get married. A useless, ugly, money-sucking daughter like you is just a nuisance."
What? My father casually demanded that I get married, as if telling me to run to the supermarket for casual shopping, leaving me dumbfounded. Without even looking at me, he insisted,
"Get married tomorrow right away."
Spouting unreasonable demands. Wait, what do you mean, Dad? I stammered, unable to find words. He explained,
"There's someone I want to be on good terms with for Amy's career. Seems like the son of someone connected to a talent agency is of marriageable age."
I protested. But why marriage? He chuckled.
"Oh, at a dinner, when I talked that our eldest daughter seemed to take a liking to the son's photo, and I hyped it up, the talk turned to about marriage. Ha ha ha."
I felt an unprecedented sense of disgust towards my father, who was in such high spirits. I had never seen a photo of such a man before, and my father talking with a smile about selling off his daughter made me sick. In this day and age, it's inconceivable to accept marrying someone I've never even seen. Despite thinking everything was impossible, my father said,
"The son on the other side seems to have taken a liking to your photo too. It's a miracle that someone with your looks has been liked. Congratulations."
Finally, my father looked into my eyes with a beaming smile, and I was speechless. Liked by him? That's just impossible. After all, I've always been told by everyone that I'm unattractive. For someone to like that. It felt disrespectful, but I couldn't help but think the son must be a pretty awful person. Maybe the son's desperate for any connection with a woman, or maybe he's trying to make me do something even more unsavory. I couldn't help but feel like there must be some ulterior motive. I wanted to refuse, but my father threatened,
"If you dare to be selfish, I'll kick you out."
So, I had no choice but to remain silent. And thus, I was forced to sign the marriage certificate against my will. My sister watched with gleeful claps and laughter. It was a moment when I cursed my own weakness and being born into this family from the bottom of my heart. And so, I was married to some man, I couldn't even tell if he was important or not. I was forcefully taken to a new home supposedly prepared by this man's parents, whom I had never met. There, I met Jason, my husband, for the first time. 10 years my senior, he was a rather plain man, not exactly gloomy, but lacking in vigor. I couldn't judge, being no great beauty myself, but he wasn't someone I could imagine falling in love with. Apparently, he also had a strained relationship with his parents, and his parents seemed pleased that he was leaving home with this marriage. Ah, like attracts like. Thinking so made me feel empty, realizing that two rejects were being burdened upon each other through marriage. After an unwanted marriage, life with my husband began. However, for the first month, there was no conversation beyond morning and bedtime greetings. We even ate separately, and I tried to avoid facing him as much as possible. Then one day, my husband said,
I know you don't feel favorably towards me. You were probably tricked into this marriage by your parents, right?
I was taken aback, unsure if I should honestly admit it. But my husband seemed to understand everything from my demeanor and simply smiled, saying,
You don't have to answer.
Then he confessed.
But I really liked your photo.
I retorted. That's impossible. My sister is prettier. He replied.
I was drawn to you the moment I saw you. Being married to you only reinforced that feeling. Perhaps because our circumstances are similar. I was attracted to who you are inside.
His words left me speechless, torn between disbelief and the sincerity in his eyes. As someone who had never even experienced first love, I couldn't comprehend this way of falling in love. My husband continued.
If you don't want this, you're free to divorce me. I have the paperwork ready. But would you consider starting as friends, if you're willing?
His shy smile made my heart flutter ever so slightly, a secret I still hold. At that moment, his willingness to be friends instead of just husband and wife touched me, making me reconsider this relationship. From then on, we started eating together. There wasn't any particular agreement, and even after learning about my husband's kindness, I didn't immediately muster the courage to become close. Of course, it took time to come together. But gradually, we began having conversations beyond greetings, discussing the weather, temperature, and sharing our preferences. Being together didn't seem so unpleasant anymore. As the invisible wall between us thinned, we found ourselves in a relationship where we shared meals and watched TV together. Interestingly, we both loved books and had many things in common. Like my husband initially mentioned, both of us had been considered troublesome by our parents, so our values and perspectives were similar, and being with each other felt more comfortable than anyone else's company. As we lived together, years passed, and in our 4th year, he proposed. Finally, we became truly husband and wife from the heart. Some might find it odd to receive a proposal after already being married on paper, but for us, it was fine. After all, we were a quirky couple from the start. We skipped dating and proposals, but together, we carefully rebuilt what we missed. After 10 years, our parents never came to check on us, and amidst peaceful days, a child was born. Living happily, I thought my life wasn't a waste, until news broke of a famous celebrity being arrested by the police. It seemed another celebrity associated with them might also be involved in the crime, as the TV buzzed daily with gossip magazine articles. Although it was a world unrelated to us, my sister's name unexpectedly emerged among those mentioned. Despite holding the title of an actress, she currently had no work and hardly engaged in any entertainment activities, occasionally taking on extra-like jobs through her agency. While her fame as an actress was virtually non-existent, her notoriety as a criminal was suddenly skyrocketing. In a photo, she was seen closely following a famous actress from her agency into a crowded venue, where many men were present. Though she managed to avoid prosecution for the criminal activity, it was obvious to everyone that she was involved. The person who leaked this photo was a former classmate of my sister's who worked at a nightclub. Apparently, they had always disliked my sister, and upon seeing her by chance at the club, discreetly took a photo, shared it with friends, and it quickly spread, eventually reaching the magazines, sparking this scandal. As my sister, I can only sigh in resignation. Well, I thought it had nothing to do with me. Until suddenly, my parents showed up at our doorstep. As soon as they opened the door, my mother, with tears in her eyes, clung to me, pleading.
Help us, Nancy.
My father desperately supported her. My mother, who used to be so beautiful, looked gaunt, with damaged hair, more gray strands, and thinning locks. "What are you here for?" "I don't remember being asked to help," I said, puzzled.
You're the only one we can rely on now.
My mother replied. Huh? I showed my confusion, prompting my father to speak up.
"Let me explain,"
he began. It turned out my sister had been arrested just recently. She was just a no-name actress, so it hadn't made the news, and I hadn't heard about it either. Apparently, my sister's classmates had managed to gather information even I, her sister, didn't know. With rumors swirling beyond what was reported in the news, my sister's misdeeds were now common knowledge among the neighbors. Consequently, my parents were being shunned, and their home was being vandalized with graffiti, rocks thrown, and silent calls.
We can't live there anymore. Why did she do such a thing? She shouldn't have been born. You're my only daughter.
My mother cried, embracing me.
Please. We can't stay in that house anymore. Let us stay here. Let's live happily together.
She pleaded. What audacity! I quietly took my mother's shoulders and gently pushed her away.
Nancy?
I don't remember ever living happily with you, I said calmly. What are you saying? We were a close-knit family, weren't we? My mother insisted.
"That's right, Nancy,"
my father added. Both of them looked puzzled by my words, clearly trying not to upset me. If we were such a close-knit family, I wouldn't have ended up in this marriage. You both sold me out for my sister. I snapped at my father.
"But being here in this house means you're still carrying on with your marriage. Isn't that a happy outcome?"
My father chuckled. Enraged by his laughter, I impulsively pushed him away. Don't joke about this. There's nothing happy about it. It just happened that my husband turned out to be a decent person, but if he had been a villain, I would have been in hell. What do you think people's lives are worth? A family built on the sacrifices of others deserves to fall apart. I shouted, my voice breaking as tears welled up. My husband, who had silently stood by, gently took my hand.
"Forgiveness is also important, Nancy,"
my father said, attempting to pacify me with a patronizing tone and a cheap smile, which only fueled my anger. I threw out a word that I had kept silent about for so long. Well then, why don't you both live together with your respective lovers? Isn't forgiveness important? If you can forgive each other's mistakes? Both of them froze at my words. As they paled, they exchanged glances.
What?
My mother stammered. Did you think I hadn't noticed? Both of you were having affairs, right? You didn't realize you were betraying each other? That's right. My parents each had a lover on the side. They probably thought no one knew, but my sister and I likely did. It wasn't just the parent-child relationship that was crumbling. Their marriage was falling apart too. This house. Where's the happiness in this family?
Were you betraying me?
My mother yelled.
"You were the one,"
My father retorted angrily. I watched their spectacle of a shouting match with cold eyes. When I suggested, "Isn't forgiveness important? Instead of fighting, why don't you forgive each other?" They fell silent, unable to respond. I don't want to be dragged into your charade anymore. From now on, leave me out of it. Completely. I don't care if it's ostracism or whatever, but I hope you both rot in hell. I have no intention of being bound by you anymore. I unleashed years of pent-up anger on the two of them, to the point of using foul language. Perhaps realizing the unbelievable nature of their relationship, they desperately pleaded with me to forgive them. How ugly. Naturally, I rejected their pleas, declaring, "If you dare to involve me further, I'll walk out of here." Well, it was easier said than done. I didn't really have a place to go, despite making such a bold statement. The police wouldn't be of much help either. Well, sometimes you just have to show some backbone. Whether my words had any effect or not, they seemed to understand there was no refuge to be found, as they hung their heads and kneeled on the pavement.
Let's go.
My husband said, urging me back into the house. I obediently followed my husband's lead back inside. After a while, I heard them sobbing outside, calling my name, but I didn't open the door. About a month after that incident, I received word that my childhood home had burned down in a suspicious fire. I don't know if it's related to my sister's situation, and the culprit hasn't been caught, but with graffiti all over the place and the house in shambles, it's clear it was vandalized. Despite their affair being exposed, my parents chose not to divorce. However, my mother suffered burns on her proud face, not severe, but leaving a scar resembling a keloid. Whether it was because of this or for another reason, one day, my father left without any word. He abandoned my mother. Mother convinced herself it was because her face was no longer beautiful, so she rarely ventured outside, despite once enjoying it. They were always cheating on each other, so I suspect it wasn't about looks, but perhaps just exhaustion from being together. But only God knows the truth. Still, I'm sure I know more about my father than my mother, who apparently didn't even notice his infidelity. It turns out my father had borrowed money from loan sharks to promote my sister, lost his job, and is now drowning in debt. After serving a year and a half in prison, my sister started appearing in questionable videos, possibly due to financial difficulties. I've heard rumors of her mental instability, but it's no longer my concern. It's true what they say about karma, and while I contemplate that, I'll watch from afar as they face their consequences. On the other hand, I'm currently blessed with 4 children and lead busy days. When the younger ones were born, they were twins, so it was really tough. After all, I only finished middle school, and my husband graduated from high school, so I worried, could we afford to raise 4 kids? But we both worked hard, got qualifications, and now I work in medical administration while my husband is in a managerial position at a cutting-edge call center that values meritocracy over educational background or nationality. Yes, studying while raising kids, especially during pregnancy, was hard back then. Even though my husband was busy with job hunting, he supported me a lot, and I'm grateful for that. He's supportive with childcare and household chores too. While our marriage started out strangely, I'm proud to be with him. In that sense, maybe I should thank those two. My husband is not only fond of our children but still treats me like a lover. It's a bit embarrassing, but even at this age, we occasionally go on dates. Whether it's to the movies or a cafe, it feels like we're dating as students, but it's precious time for us who got married without experiencing such things. I hope we can continue to cherish each other and our family. May tomorrow be another happy day. That's why I live each day appreciating the precious moments.